The catastrophe of Lahaina and the catastrophe of Afghanistan are linked. They're linked by our elite or our elected officials, our bureaucrats, whether they're at the State Department or whether they're working for Maui County. They're addled by ideology. So you have the guy in Maui who's responsible for water management shutting off the water because, quote, water is sacred. Well, those human beings are now dead.
Hi, welcome to the stream. I'm John Zmirak, and today we're again joining my good friend and co-writer Jason Jones, who is a contributing writer here at the stream. Jason, we're here to mark a very dark anniversary for America and its friends in the world, aren't we?
This tragedy in Lahaina.
That's a really staggering event, and it's already disappearing from the media. But I just saw a report today that the electric company has admitted the first fire, yeah, we caused that from our power line, but that was put out, and then a second fire started that was totally unrelated, so this isn't our fault. The fault is the fire department. Did you hear that?
Yeah, well, it's a circling firing squad, so I'm actually happy to see this circling firing squad form because early on, they were unified in dissembling and providing disinformation and trying to hide the truth from the people of the world, the people from Maui. This is what we know about Lahaina. No conspiracies, no conjecture. We know the police stopped people from fleeing and turned them around to their death. And only those who disregarded the police blockades lived. We know that countless children died home alone. We know the number is much higher than the 115 that they're saying. It's anywhere. The lowest numbers I've heard is around 480. And the highest numbers I've heard is 1,200. The FBI said there were 1,200 missing people. Now the number they're saying is 480 with 115 already dead. So we're looking between 500 and 1,500 dead. Pray to God it's that lower number. But the idea that 500 Americans burned to death is unimaginable.
And what is the Biden administration doing talking about climate change and considering whether to declare a climate change emergency and cite the Lahaina fire as proof of why that needs to be done?
Yeah, John, let's be clear, and this is why I'm so grateful for the stream. You and I have been writing partners now for over a decade, maybe a decade and a half. And, we've written in a lot of different places, but this is one place I really feel at home. And where we can just say the truth. When I hear the words green energy, it's as if I'm hearing the words like Nazi party. It's the green lobby, the climate cult is responsible for more deaths. The Greens are responsible for more deaths than the Reds. Just looking at the global ban on DDT, which killed over 500 million Asians and Africans, using corn and sugar for fuel, for ethanol, staples.
Instead of letting it be sold as food for the poor.
And yeah, instead of letting it be sold as food for the poor, using the water and the land that could be providing food for the poor. Instead of that, no.
How about taking away reliable energy based on natural gas and oil from all around the third world and forcing these people to rely on turbines and windmills and other unreliable sources for their energy grids? The people in Sutton Place are never going to be without power. It's going to be the people in the favelas of Rio de Janeiro.
Yeah, or people in Lahaina. Listen, these people in Lahaina, working class folks, and, they might be sitting on land. One of my donors said, Jason, why are you helping people? I went on Zillow and their homes there are like $2 million a home. I'm like, the average home in Hawaii has 7 co-signers on a mortgage. A starting home is $1 million. A lot of these families, they've passed this home down. It's been in the family since the 20s and 30s when their ancestors were sugarcane workers. These were sugarcane planters' homes that now might be worth $1.5–2 million. They've got aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, cousins, all living in those homes. Now those homes were burned to the ground, and vultures are circling them, peppering their phones with phone calls, trying to buy that land because they know they're desperate. They're homeless, without jobs now. We're trying to open up a bank as near as possible to Lahaina because we're setting up a fund for the burials. The Vulnerable People Project is committing to covering as many of the funerals as we can, up into all of them. And then, all the banks in town have been burned down. All the business is gone.
And the Biden administration, what are they doing? If we remember how the Bush administration was raked over the coals when local officials in New Orleans didn't handle Katrina properly, what is the Biden administration doing for these vulnerable Americans? Anything, Jason?
Oh yeah, I mean, there was the fumbled attempt at victimism. There was the fumbled attempt at feigning concern for the families of Lahaina to exploit it for the climate occult agenda, but it was a total catastrophe. First of all, this problem wasn't caused by the federal government. This was caused by the local and state government. It was caused by Hawaiian Electric. They didn't bury those power lines because they didn't want to waste money on evil energy. They wanted to reinvest into green energy. Well, John, we talked about this the last episode. You're in a poor neighborhood when the electric lines are above ground. This is how you know you're in a neighborhood that the city and county and the state does not care about. Because in those nice neighborhoods, those lines are buried underground. This is just the way it goes.
Because it's safer.
It's safer. Yeah, and it's not an eyesore, but the key point is it's safer. So you have this invaluable real estate in Lahaina, but these were working class families that were living on this land that weren't willing to budge or to sell. As soon as the fire rages through there at a mile a minute, literally, the vultures descend. Well, the family still haven't found most of the bodies and may find none of the bodies. Well, the ground is still literally hot. You have Joe Biden, his first response was no comment. And again, I want to be very sensitive about this because this is my home. And I do work in crises a lot. And oftentimes conjecture and conspiracy theory or weaponizing a catastrophe for political gain, it's repugnant to me. And so, how do we handle a reality when it's the Democrat-controlled one-party state and their arrogance and their incompetence and their ordering themselves and their policy towards ideology and not their constituents that has led to this? And so, on the one hand, you don't want to bring division and you don't want to make this hyper-political, but the reality is this was absolutely caused by the incompetence of the local elected officials and by the power company. And then you have the vultures from out of state swooping in and trying to, prey on these broken families. And when I tell you they're broken, John, you can't imagine your hometown gone, your neighborhood gone. If you're a young student, every kid some of the kids are missing. All of the homes are gone. Every family displaced. And what does Biden say? His first words were no comment. I think it's very important to understand why Joe Biden said no comment, because all they have been doing is dissembling and communicating misinformation. And so Biden knew enough to know that they weren't telling the truth about what happened in Lahaina.
But they hadn't yet figured out how to blame it on climate change. They had to work that out.
Yeah, he didn't know what his talking points were.
And then the next talking point was how his Corvette was once almost burned. And
he said, yeah, unbelievable. He comes to Hawaii. First of all, he blames it. He tells a few really bizarre stories, making it about himself. Even the liberal press had headlines like, it's not always about you, Joe Biden. It was so disingenuous, lacking of empathy. You have the no comment, which lacked empathy. Then you had the making it about your Corvette. Then he falls asleep in a meeting with survivors.
Well, other people's family members dying is boring. What does that have to do with you? This is the same total absence of empathy we saw with Afghanistan.
Yes.
It seems to be a running theme, but you could even go back. It's the same lack of empathy we saw when Democrat governors in state after state dumped COVID patients in nursing homes. The one group of people, nursing home patients, who actually were in severe danger from COVID, they dump COVID patients there. And then when they die, they treat them like medical waste. They don't let them have religious burials. They can't have clergy. They can't have visitors. They're wrapped up the way, frankly, unborn babies are from abortion clinics in biohazard bags, and they're incinerated like euthanized pets from a kill shelter. That happened in New York City. That happened in Wisconsin. It happened in California. And it's a running theme the people who don't believe human life is sacred because they don't believe God made us treat people kind of the way the Nazis did in their medical experimentation camps and the way the communists did in their gulags.
Yeah, there's that beautiful movie, that Italian movie from the late 1990s, Life is Beautiful. And there's that scene where he's at a wedding for the woman that he's in love with. He gets her to leave her betrothal dinner. But there's a scene where the bride's mother is talking to these other teachers, she's an educator, about how intelligent the German students are, and he gives them an example, and it was the euthanasia. The example was, if you have 1,000 mentally retarded children and they cost the state X amount of dollars, and you euthanize the 1,000 children with disabilities, how much do you save the state? And she was just presenting it as a math problem, and Roberto Bernini is like looking at them like, have you people lost your mind? We have an elite who have lost their mind from top to bottom. I mean, look, the mayor of Maui County is not some smooth talking, slick, politician educated at Yale. This guy is, a clown, but he showed an utter lack of empathy for his own people, which I just couldn't believe. And the dissembling was unbelievable. John, you and I are professional communicators. I'm a filmmaker. I have a podcast. We write. I run a human rights organization, but communicating is a big part of what I do. And communicating uncomfortable truths or communicating in confused situations is something I have to do a lot. And so I just have a simple rule, which is say what I believe to be true as clearly as possible. When I'm unsure of the truth of something, make sure it's clear that I don't know. But it's just very simple. Communicate what you know as clearly as possible. Don't hide what you don't know. Share what you don't know as clearly as possible. So if I'm mayor of Maui County in the wake of this catastrophe, my job would be not to protect Hawaiian Electric, not to protect BlackRock, not to advance my own political agenda or interests or that of my political party or my governor. It would be, as mayor of Maui County, to tell the people of Maui everything that I know as mayor, that I was able to learn as mayor, express that as clearly as possible. Where there are uncomfortable truths, express those as clearly as possible. Where there's a lot of confusion, express, say we don't have the facts on this. We're still trying to understand. Hawaiian Electric claims that the lines were de-energized, but we have video of what appeared to be down power lines, starting fires. We're going to get to the bottom of all of this. We don't want to jump to conclusions. They could be thoughtful and careful without being boldly dishonest and condescending to the people. But
have they just gotten in the habit of just blatantly lying? I mean, why are they so bad at this?
I think it might be just the mimetic contagion of, I think a lot of elected officials think that their job in life is to dissemble. And it's just unbelievable, because you see this in both parties. Unlike, this is where Trump, it kind of like cuts Gordian's knot. Like when he was asked by CNN, I believe it was CNN, about Ukraine, and they were speaking in just such clinical terms. And he goes, I want them to stop dying. I want people to stop dying. And they looked at him like he was crazy.
Yeah.
The fact that it takes John Zmirak, Jason Jones, and God forbid, Donald Trump to present empathy in the public square, we're doomed.
It should not take a prophetic spirit to say, people are dying, that's bad, I want it to stop. If you say that and they think you're crazy, there's something profoundly wrong going on. If you can't just say, people dying needlessly, I view that as a bad thing. Can we stop that? These simplistic answers. This is just white privilege. This is the voice of the historical patriarchal meta narrative. I start to think that as people drift away from supernatural faith, they're losing even the most basic natural virtues, like telling the truth, like caring about your own family and your own neighborhood, like even these basic things that the pagans had, post-Christians are much worse than pagans. They don't have the innocence of the pagans. They don't have the ignorance. They don't have the excuse of the pagans. These are people who looked Jesus in the eye and said, yeah, not so much. And the result, it's far, far worse than Vikings or ancient Romans or Aztecs, isn't it?
It is. And I think the American people have even been trained to expect dissembling, to expect to be lied to. And when a politician speaks the truth clearly, they're almost offended. I think there's a large segment of the American people like, how dare you tell us the truth clearly? Don't you know your job is to lie to us? And if the truth, the truths that are being hidden from the American people, everything from where their electric car batteries are coming from and the hell on earth that is necessary for the green economy to exist.
Let's talk a little bit about that. I like to tell people petroleum-based cars run on the bones of dinosaurs. Electric cars run on the bones of African children.
Ooh, yeah, that's more offensive than what I tell people is your green car. I go, oh, you got a green vehicle? I like to call them black and brown cars because they're run on black coal and brown kids. So, you're right. The green economy is ruthless. It is ruthless and brutal. You're talking about like the oil economy. I live in Texas, and there's this. My hobby's mixed martial arts. There's this Hawaiian kid, and he's a Hawaiian kid. Like he's got his tribal tattoos. He speaks really thick pidgin. He drives a huge pickup truck with Hawaiian across the back of his pickup truck, and he's got his local wife. And I said, "How did you end up in Texas?" He said, well, this is just a real opportunity for me to make, a six-figure income. He works, he works throwing pipe in oil fields. It's a really hard job. It's a manly job. He makes six figures a year. And
it has safety equipment and safety regulations,
right.
OSHA and insurance and nearby hospitals, all the things that the lithium miners, the 10-year-old boys mining lithium in Sudan don't have.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I used to think that these people, they really cared. They were just naive. They just don't care. They really don't. You can put the truth right in their face, and they just don't care. We skipped away from Afghanistan, leaving 20 million people in severe hunger. The Vulnerable People Project, we had teams looking for villages facing hunger to deliver food as part of our Coal for Christmas, where we deliver coal and food in the winter months. We'd find whole villages that appeared that they were all asleep, but they had just all died of exposure and they had died from hunger. These aren't covered in the news. These aren't newsworthy. When they were ginning us up for the war, when they wanted us to support this military package or that package, for the $1 trillion grift that was going on between the military industrial and NGO industrial complex, then they would pull our heartstrings. But when it's time to go, they never look back, and they don't care one bit about the pain and suffering that they're causing. For example, you and I have a bit of a difference of opinion on Ukraine. We both want a ceasefire. I'm a little more pro-Ukrainian, and I want to support them in their fight until we can get a ceasefire. But we both recognize the reality is they're being used. And when NATO and the West is done using them to achieve their objectives, they'll be thrown away like the Libyans, the Syrians, the Iraqis, and the Afghans.
I'm amazed anyone in the world is foolish enough to ally with the United States. Have they never heard of South Vietnam? Have they never heard of Afghanistan, of the Christians in Iraq? I mean, the last ally I would want on the face of the earth is the Americans, because the moment they get bored, they see some shiny object and they lose interest, you are thrown to the wolves. Whereas the Russians stuck by the Cubans. They're still helping out the damned wretched communist Cubans out of like third Cold War nostalgia. We throw our partners under the bus the moment we get bored with them.
Yeah, there was a comic I saw, comic strip, where it was Ukraine, and then there were these hands reaching for Ukraine from the West, Germany, the United States, UK, and on their arms it said, "You will be one of us. You will soon be one of us." And then reaching from Syria, Iraq, Libya, and Afghanistan were skeleton hands. and on their bones was carved, "You will soon be one of us."
Wow. Yeah,
And
that's very well.
but we as Americans, and this is, I believe, why am I in Afghanistan still running safe houses, delivering food to our Afghan allies? Because we made promises. The American government made promises. The American people were whipped into an enthusiasm to make commitments. Commitments, John, you and I were opposing in writing and in speech, but yet we made these promises. And I have a sense of dignity. And I believe that and as an infantry veteran, the idea that we abandon our cohorts that have fallen into the hands of the enemy is really the number one sin of a soldier, is to leave one's cohort to fall into the hands of the enemy, the way we allowed our allies in Afghanistan and their wives and their children to fall into the hands of the enemy. So that's why I'm there. But these people have no sense of responsibility. I don't see David Frum or Bill Kristol. I don't see, these guys helping me rebuild Afghanistan, Iraq, for example, right now.
George W. Bush is not putting some of the Bush oil family oil money towards helping the Christians in Iraq, who he threw them into a genocide. He made a Christian genocide possible and did nothing, absolutely nothing, to protect the Christian communities in Iraq, even while Christians in America stupidly supported him and supported his war that was based on lies. I wrote a column at the Stream a few years back that any American president who wanted to intervene in a foreign country that had not directly attacked us, the condition would be that when the war is over, he has to live the rest of his life in that country's capital. So Bush would have to live in Baghdad, Obama would have to live in Benghazi, and so on. I think such a rule would work. The interesting thing is Donald Trump kept the peace in Afghanistan. Donald Trump kept the peace in Ukraine. Donald Trump said the Iraq war was a lie and a disaster. And what are they doing? They're trying to put him in prison. So I think you and I maybe should take a prudential lesson from that. Telling the truth too much in the face of these enormously powerful and absolutely ruthless people is a very dangerous thing.
Here's the thing, though. I know that in prison I'll be able to read, lift weights, and pray the rosary. I love my family. They can write me letters and I'll see them. But yeah, no, it is unbelievable. Russia invaded Ukraine during the Obama administration. Russia invaded Ukraine during the Biden administration. Russia did not invade Ukraine during the Trump administration. And one thing is, Trump is just very practical, man. Russia could not have invaded Ukraine because we were energy independent. I mean, this fact, to you stream viewers, listen to this. We have more natural gas than the entire world combined. We have more oil in Saudi Arabia and more oil than Russia. This war could end tomorrow by just kicking open our energy and providing the world the cleanest, best energy in the world. And then Russia would be bankrupt. This war would stop tomorrow. But no, whatever, I don't want to speculate, the real agenda is behind the climate cult. That's just not even an answer. What is an answer? A quagmire, an endless quagmire where Ukrainian boys die. That's better to these elite lunatics than energy independence. Blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline, which was an environmental catastrophe, I think it is reasonable to assume the Ukrainians didn't do that on their own. Is that reasonable to assume?
I've met a lot of Ukrainians. They don't seem like the highest tech people. They've got great.
It just makes me think that it's something they didn't do on their own. Talk about an environmental catastrophe. That was an environmental catastrophe. No, do that rather than open up America's energy. Yeah, that's who we're dealing with.
They no longer even talk about oil spills or clean air or clean water or keeping the earth clean for our grandchildren. They don't even talk about that anymore. Now they talk about how we shouldn't have children and grandchildren because they will have carbon footprints and they will destroy the climate. The climate is important for its own sake, not for human beings. Human beings have been taken out of the green agenda. They no longer talk about how any of this benefits or affects human beings. They've decided to make the climate and the environment an idol in itself, a cult figure in itself, as if they're worshiping some relentless Earth Mother who doesn't care about the human race.
Yeah. By the way, she's a dark, cruel Earth Mother that wants a colder planet. The idea that Bill Gates says out loud, we need to chalk the atmosphere. You're going to eat cricket meat, and we are going to pollute the atmosphere to block out the sun. This is unbelievable. But you see it. I see it on the ground in Afghanistan. I see it. I was just in Ukraine. You see it in Ukraine with the Ukrainian boys with their face missing. From a 50 caliber round that went right past their face. Their legs are missing. Their eyes are missing. I went to a hospital that was an old Soviet era prison. Every room was filled with a soldier missing in arms, legs, eyes, ears. Every room. Why isn't this in the media? This war could stop tomorrow by declaring American energy independence. But no, that's just not going to happen because the climate cult. Lahaina, you had a whole town built and hundreds dead. Why? Because they wouldn't bury the power lines. Because why? That's evil energy. They didn't maintain the brakes because why? I guess snails and the environment and pollution. The idea that carbon dioxide is pollution is insane. I mean, it started with we don't know when human life begins. Oh, yeah, we did. And then it was, carbon dioxide is pollution. No, it's plant food. And then it was
there are 47 genders, and we
then
can't.
It was 47 genders. Like, really, what's next? But
it takes Alice Cooper, the rock and roller, insists there are men and there are women, and that's all there is. And he's getting canceled. Carlos Santana got threatened with cancellation for saying men and women exist. How can you argue with people who embrace the reductio ad absurdum? They race to say the most absurd possible things. It's very difficult to argue with people who embrace absurdity and meaninglessness and nihilism for their own sake. In a sense, it's a very clever tactic. You can't win an argument with such people. You just have to put them in padded rooms and keep them isolated away from sharp objects.
Yeah, and they're the minority, and they're crazy, and they're losing. Look, Carlos Santana, what was great is I was just in the San Francisco airport a couple of days ago, and they had all these sort of expressions of solidarity with the LGBTQAII plus. Did I say it right? I don't want to be canceled.
I always say LGBTQ. My name is Legion. That's
good.
That's my acronym.
That's good. So yes, but Carlos Santana had like a poster up with a quote of his, in solidarity with the LGBTQ plus. My name is Legion crew. What's wonderful about that is, that guy who they have up in a big billboard in the San Francisco airport, has now come out and said this trans thing is off the wall. This is just too much. You people have gone crazy. And they have. And I think they're breaking. But how many people are going to die? And, I guess we've kind of gone astray. The poetry I wanted of this episode was this, that the catastrophe of Lahaina and the catastrophe of Afghanistan are linked. They are linked by our elite or our elected officials, our bureaucrats, whether they're at the State Department or whether they're working for Maui County. They're addled by ideology. So you have the guy in Maui who's responsible for water management shutting off the water because, quote, water is sacred. Well, those human beings are now dead. You have the U.S. State Department that was shoving down the throats of the people of Afghanistan trans ideology and abortion. And then they skip away, leaving them to death and destruction and never look back again. So you have people who are ideologues who feel no sense of personal responsibility for the catastrophes that they have a hand in. I lost a lot of sleep over our failure to rescue everyone in the weeks of the initial evacuation from Afghanistan. It was chaotic. People were being caught and captured and killed by the Taliban, people that we were trying to rescue. And I don't think Blinken or Biden or General Milley, I don't think they lose any sleep over the deaths of our Afghan allies, of our 13 American service members who died in the Abbey Gate explosion. I don't think that the mayor of Maui County or Governor Josh Green is losing any sleep for the catastrophe of Lahaina. We need to do a better job in electing people who we know are ordered to their constituents. I want more Dailies from the 60s. We just need good old politicians who are like, I'm running for office to fight for the people who I elect me to represent them. That was the mystery of Trump that I think a lot of us didn't get early on, is like, he's not a conservative. He's not. Like, obviously, he's not what we would call a conservative, but he's somebody who wants to represent, he feels that all the American people should be represented by their government.
Whereas if you looked at virtually all the Republicans in that presidential debate, all the Oompa Loompas dancing on Willy Wonka's grave, they're perfectly happy if the deep state fakes charges to keep Trump out of the race, even though 70% of the Republicans want him. They're perfectly happy to cooperate and say, well, we're happy you can take out the competition. And then the people will just have to realize that we're the only choice. That the system has closed off this choice because it's irresponsible. Trump's not a responsible choice. We're the responsible choices. So you're going to eat your broccoli and your stewed meat and your potted ham, and you're going to like it because what you want doesn't matter, because the ordinary people really don't matter. You're just beneath contempt.
They don't. And it's your article. By the way, Steve Bannon texted me your article. And he said, next they're coming after us. He goes, John Zmirak hit a home run again. And, I'm
supposed to be on his show. I'm waiting for them to schedule it.
Okay, good. I just got an email while we were talking that 4 progressive pro-lifers, 1 trans, the 3 others were progressive, but they're pro-lifers, were arrested for violating the FACE Act. And they were just found guilty and immediately they were sent to prison just today, minutes ago.
Long prison terms for nonviolent pro-life protests. The people who burned down America's cities in the George Floyd riots are getting judgments, civil judgments against the cities that tried to stop them from burning them down.
I mean, yeah, we had 2, I guess it was at least, I think it was 2 people that tried to derail a train in California that would have killed countless people. Got 30 days suspended sentence.
This is a narco tyranny. Anarchy for me, tyranny for you. We who are in power, we have our mobs, our violent mobs, and we'll unleash them when we want, and you will deal with the consequences. And if you try to defend yourself like Kyle Rittenhouse or Jake Gardner, we will charge you with murder and we'll try to destroy you. You're supposed to just let our mobs roll over you, and if you defend yourself, you'll be prosecuted. But if you guys drop a piece of gum on the sidewalk, we're sending you to prison for life. This is literally how the Nazis took over in Germany.
If you take a selfie at the Capitol, you're going away to a dark black prison site. No, and this is why I'm glad I'm in Texas. Look, I mean, for those of you who live in blue states, I mean, to live in a blue state now takes a lot of courage.
And it's dangerous here in Texas. They're trying to destroy Ken Paxton, our Secretary of State, our Attorney General, because he fought off election fraud in the state of Texas, but he also fought against the Bush dynasty. The Bush machine is working together with the Democrats to get him impeached and removed from office on fake charges. And a bunch of Republicans may vote to remove him from office. And my next column at the Stream is going to be naming those Republican state senators in Texas who are considering voting to remove one of the only attorneys general in America who fought off vote fraud and prevented Texas from being stolen the way Wisconsin was.
Yeah, well, they've got Prescott Bush lurking around here desperately trying to get into a position of power.
And George P. Bush.
Yeah, that's right, George Prescott Bush.
George P. Bush, who, when he was running for the position of Texas Railroad Commissioner, complained to Vanity Fair that he was sick of having to run for dog catcher. That's a direct quote. He used that to characterize the office he was running for at the moment. That's how much these people despise him.
Well, I met him in 2004 when I worked for the RNC, and he was a surrogate, and he came in, and I was on a van with him. And at the time, he was very young, but he was pro-choice. he was a leftist, as far as I remember talking to him. He's definitely pro-abortion. So, yeah, that's what we have. But we have a responsibility. This election is going to be very important. This next presidential election is going to be very important. There are real consequences to having elected officials that respond to ideology. And by the way, I fell for it in a way that punished Hawaii. You know, in the 90s, I was a young conservative. I was chairman of the College Republicans at the University of Hawaii at the time. And I was a vocal advocate for NAFTA. I was a vocal advocate I was kind of a libertarian purist. I was a vocal advocate for most favorite permanent MFN status for China and GATT 94 and all of that. And look at the catastrophe that permanent most favored nation status has done to the world. And in the conservative movement, so many of us were ordered to ideology. GATT 94, General Agreement on Trades and Tariffs 94, moved Hawaii from the global ag market, which swept away the number one industry in the state, which was the industry that knit together a very unique and beautiful community that's been hanging on with white knuckles now for almost 30 years to maintain their community and to stay and hold it together. So all of us can be swept away by ideology when we look to ideology rather than the interests of our family, our friends, and our neighbors.
I once was asked to define ideology as opposed to philosophy. And I said, an ideology is a half-baked idea with a fully loaded gun. It is a worldview you adopt because it suits your personal interests, your psychological drives, your emotional needs, your groupthink, the feelings of the people around you, your sense of superiority to other people who aren't around you. Anything that motivates you to think a certain way, other than it being true, will tend to make you an ideologue. And that's an important distinction.
Yeah, and it's I think Pat Buchanan said, the older I get, the smarter Russell Kirk becomes, or something like that. And I think that's just something that comes with time as we all try to escape ideology. But the left has become drunk with the most virulent anti-human ideology, and the first people that die from it are those who drink it. They're walking dead. They're zombies. It's such a lifeless, soul-crushing worldview that they really do become zombies. And they shrug, as you said, they lack empathy, and they shrug at human suffering, whether it's on the other side of the world or it's close to home.
Well, let's just get out there and continue to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ, and which drives us to empathy with everyone, especially the most vulnerable. And those are the people you're trying to serve through the Vulnerable People Project. Where can people go to help?
Well, if you want to help the people of Hawaii, go to hopeforhawaii.com. Hopeforhawaii.com. We're the first organization on the ground that was successfully distributing aid. We delivered a pop-up school for the Catholic community there in Lahaina, and the principal sent footage of the first day of school, so the kids are back at school singing hymns. And but the big thing I'd like to ask, if you're watching this, if you go to hopeforhawaii.com, we really want to cover all the funerals. It's going to cost about $5,000 per funeral, and VPP really wants to do that. And we believe this is important. It's the best way that we can honor the living, is to shoulder the burden of them honoring those who've died. And it also communicates hope to the people of Lahaina, a truth that we know, that we have an eternal destiny, and the death is not the end.
Yeah, let's give the people who passed in Lahaina Christian funerals, unlike the people who died in the nursing homes in New York and Wisconsin and California, who were burned as medical waste. Fundamental distinction of human dignity.
Yeah, John, I'll tell you, a Catholic leader said to me when he heard I was doing this, "Why would you do this? Let God take care of the dead. We'll take care of the living." And I said, well, no, God can take care of the living. I'll take care of the dead. By the way, we're doing both.
Yeah, apparently this Catholic leader had never heard that one of the 7 corporal works of mercy was to bury the dead.
Yeah, I know. I couldn't believe it. And when I'll tell you what's interesting is, once our number got out there to the people of Lahaina, actually, even as I've been talking to you, I got a message. They're coming in continuously asking for help. One lady called me and said, "Thank you so much. If another person shows up at my house where we're all staying with T-shirts, how much clothes do they think I can use?" She's like, thank you for helping us with the biggest burden we have. How are we going to honor our loved ones we lost? Because a town of 13,000 losing 1,000 people is unbelievable. That would be like 800,000 New Yorkers dying on 9/11. So, and some of these families, have lost multiple family members and their businesses and their homes and their jobs. And so to me, John, and it's very personal for me, this is our hat, our Vulnerable People Project hat. We have patches for everywhere we serve. So like, for example, we have, Sudan. We just did a rescue mission in Sudan. We make Chinese occupied East Turkestan. We serve the Uyghur. So we have these patches everywhere we go. The reason we've always had a Hawaii patch is I founded VPP in Hawaii in 2002. And so that's why we have the Hawaii patch. We're making a Lahaina patch now. The idea that we would have to serve the people of Maui was something that would have never crossed my mind.
The idea that American citizens would be in the same category as Kurds in Iraq, Yazidi in Iraq, Syriac Christians in Syria, hunted American translators in Afghanistan. But the idea that American citizens in one of the 50 states would be in these third world conditions with third world governments as no more responsive than they are in corrupt third world countries. It is a shame and a shock and a scandal.
Yeah, our mission is we don't go where the big aid organizations are, where the world is set up, where the news crews are set up. We don't go. The idea that we had to go to Lahaina is unbelievable. The idea that the media is not telling the truth about Lahaina is unimaginable. And, you guys aren't going to like this, John. You might disagree with me on this. We do have structural racism in this country, and it's the neoliberal elite. They are bigots. And I don't believe that they think the people who live in Lahaina are Americans. Could you imagine if in Santa Barbara, this happened in Santa Barbara, and there were hundreds of blonde-haired, blue-eyed, rich kids missing? I have to imagine it'd be a pretty big news story if there were, several hundred residents of Santa Monica or Santa Barbara missing.
I would agree with you, Jason, but if there were white kids in Appalachia, they wouldn't care. So
That's true.
It's not race, it's class.
There
if
you have
something
it.
happened to one of the Obama's kids, it would be a news story 24/7. So it's about class. It's about who is a member of the international business class, who has ever been to a TED Talk, who went to an Ivy League school, who is a subscriber to NPR and has the stupid tote bag. That is the new sign. That the life begins, not a conception. Life begins when you get into a decent prep school.
So if I put an NPR tote bag on my door, will the angel of death pass over me?
The FBI might not kick it down guns blazing. And at that, Jason, I think we should wrap it up. Vulnerable People Project, hopeforhawaii.com.
Yeah, and our website's thegreatcampaign.org. And if you want to see all our work with Christians in Nigeria and Malawi and South Sudan and Afghanistan and Hawaii, that's thegreatcampaign.org. And if you want to support us as we stand with the families of Lahaina, hopeforhawaii.com. Anyone who donates $250 or more, they get one of our hats with the Lahaina patch. And those patches come in this week. So
It's good that the patch is removable, because the next place the Biden administration screws up, you can just plug that in.
Well, look, here's the last place. It was just 8 weeks ago we were rescuing people in Sudan while the embassy was closed. The embassy was closed, and we were getting Americans out.
You're just playing whack-a-mole with the victims of the New World Order, Jason. And God bless you and keep you going.
Well, John, you just revealed our secret. It's not an accident. When I founded this organization, the idea was that if we could create a battle everywhere they sought to smash a vulnerable community, I would slow them down. So you just revealed our secret. There's a reason we do what we do. And the macro reason is we really want to defeat the globalists. And we think the most effective way to do that is to stand with those communities that are in their way, to stand with those vulnerable communities, to make them, to give them a fighting chance.
Well, God bless you and keep going. And I hope String Readers help you out. Bye-bye.